back to just one more row. Little crafting vlog we got going on here. And I know it's been a hot minute since I've posted up a video of me actually talking and not just making a cardigan. I kind of needed a little bit of time because I had several projects going on and they all needed to get worked on. So the good news is that pretty much doing the longer videos where we've got the segments like that, probably not going to happen again for a while. And I've also got a number of projects all done. And the first thing we're going to start with is, ta-da! This is my larger lace cardigan here, pullover. My larger lace pullover. It's from 1935 and it is very comfortable. This one is definitely worked top down. You do the collar, you put on the shoulders, you work from the shoulders down. And then the sleeves are knitted on. So this pattern was pretty easy to put together. The instructions were really straightforward. The lace pattern is not complicated. I will call this an introductory lace pattern, which is pretty good for me because I'm not super experienced making lace. But some of the measurements to it were interesting. I've already said on here that I had a lot of trouble getting the gauge because they wanted you to have 8 stitches wide and 8 rows tall. And I'm starting to wonder maybe that was that you were using very small needles with slightly thicker yarn, so it becomes not quite as pliable but also not quite as stretchy. I'm not really sure. I know the yarn that I went with, I ended up getting 12 rows to the inch with that. But I did have to do some of my own calculations because the instructions would just say work your arms as long as you wanted to, just decrease 2 stitches every 1 inch. Well, it said every 8 rows, but at 8 rows to the inch, that was 1 inch. So I kind of walked in, having to understand how to interpret some of those directions because they weren't super clear. It's not like in other directions where they may say, oh, work for 3 inches in ribbing and then work for 13 inches for your body and your side seam before you start decreasing for the arms if you're doing set and sleeves. They just said, make it as long as you want, which is very cool as far as, oh my barrette. I don't even know why I try wearing these things anymore. Like they used to stay in my hair and then they just don't anymore. So sorry for the weird hair situation. The length on some of this has been, okay, we'll work for this long or however long you'd like. And so you kind of have to walk in with some of your own understandings about how long you'd like things to be. And the best way to go ahead and do that is you need to be able to get your own measurements and then you need to be able to kind of understand how that works with your body. One of the things to point out with this particular piece is that it does have a lot of ease in the chest. This is meant for somebody who has a 39-inch bust. But does have several inches of ease within it, and that's awesome. But do understand that you are going to have to make your arms a little bit shorter to accommodate that ease, or you end up with the baggy arm situation, which is kind of my oops, and I didn't take that into account. So now I have slightly longer arms. They're longer by about 1 inch, 2 inches, so I can literally just take and fold up my sleeve cuffs and it'll be all fine. But I wanted to go ahead and show off 2 little techniques that I've used on this that you might find useful. First, my edgings. This is worked top down, so you would use the bottom of your cuff or your hem. So right here. Both of these are done in, I think it's the Judy Stretchy Bind Off. It's a super stretchy bind off is what it is. And I end up doing my bind offs now with a crochet hook versus a knitting needle. And the way that you would do that bind off is knitting needle in your dominant hand. I just change it out for a crochet hook and I do it at least like, 1 size smaller than the knitting needle I'm using. Possibly 2, but using it like that makes it much easier for me, and I find that it creates a nicer and more consistent edging, and as you can tell it's still really stretchy, but I just find that it works easier for me, and using the smaller hook tends to work better. Having crochet hooks is not a silly thing if you are a knitter just to have them around, so you can easily do things like picking up stitches, certain bind offs, and certain forms of seaming like doing crocheted edging. They're useful to have around. And for certain things, like you're putting putting a garment together for the first time and you're not really sure how it's going to work, that's not such a big deal on a lot of modern garments, but for some of your older vintage or historic ones, sometimes the patterns don't always give you a lot of instructions. They'll just basically say, here are the pieces, okay, seam it together. And they don't tell you that, oh, by the way, you're supposed to have pleats in the back, or that this is supposed to be gathered down. And one of the easy tricks with that is to use your crochet hook to do, in a contrasting thread that you can easily take out, to do a quick like fake seaming together, just so you can see how it looks, because that crocheted edge will hold and will hold fairly well. You can easily take it out, and you can move things around and it's not going to damage anything. I would say if you have a chance at, whenever you go into your thrift stores, or my case, my local fabric store ended up having a bunch of the steel crochet hooks. I really should have bought one, like every single size, even if I had duplicates, just because they were like 50 cents a piece. Sometimes you can find them at yard sales, thrift stores, friends or family. If people are giving them away or they're cheap enough, it may make sense to go ahead and just pick them up for, they're $1 or something like that. Go ahead and just pick them up because they are useful for you to have. Having them in a couple sizes can be very useful for you as a knitter, whether you're doing some of the stretchy edgings, which once I started using the crochet hook to do that stretchy edging, I'll totally stick with that. It's stretchy, and because you're using a smaller hook, looks nearly invisible, and I just think it looks much nicer and neater. So even if the stitch pattern looks a little bit different, again, I work in such a fine gauge that one, no one's going to notice, and two, if they are, we really need to have a conversation about personal space, because you have been inspecting my sleeves way too closely. But I wanted to go ahead and take a few moments to talk about how I did some of the calculations to refigure some of like my rows per inch for this particular garment. That one there, when we were talking about, because I was unable to get row count. And I know that can happen in garments where, you really want to get the stitch count, get that part down, but then row count can be a little wibbly. And what do you do when your row count is like super off? So let's grab the whiteboard and take a look at it over here. So first off, this is the handy dandy whiteboard. I love having this thing around because I can make all of my crafting notes on here, and then I can just take a picture of it and erase it. Super duper helpful, especially if you're still just trying to work out the math on something. So the thing I want to talk about today is going to be recalculating your row count. And one of the first things that you need to know, and it is very helpful to remember, is that knit stitches are actually not square. If you take a look at them, you'll notice that they look something a little bit more like this. If you actually go and measure them with the number of rows per inch and the number of stitches per inch, approximately like that. So an easy ratio to remember is 4 stitches to 5 rows. So that's the first thing to remember, is the knit stitches are not square. This is going to come into play so that when you do come across a pattern that says that your row count and your stitch count should be the same, this becomes very confusing because they aren't square. You can make them more square by using thicker yarn on thinner needles, but that means that your knitting is going to be extremely tight, and it's not going to drape. The tighter your fabric, the less drape you're going to have. But let's say that you're going to go ahead and have to recalculate things. What's some of the information that you need to know? Your number of inches or centimeters. So when you look at your finished product, like how long do you want it to be? You're going to need to know that. Your rows per inch or centimeter. Okay, so that is what the count that you are currently getting. And C is going to be the pattern. Rows per inch or centimeter. And I'm writing both of them. That is an M. I can spell, I swear. And the reason I'm writing them both with inches and centimeters is because depending on where you're at, you may use inches or you may use centimeters or you may use them interchangeably. So I figure I just include both of them. So if you have a piece here and it is supposed to be, 5 tall, I will say for my sake is going to be 5 inches tall. You need to figure out what are your rows per inch. So if your pattern, so this is A, right? 5 inches. And B, let's say you're getting, 8 rows to the inch. And your pattern says that you're supposed to be getting 6. So we need to go from 6 rows to 8. Well, according to your pattern instructions, you should be getting 30 rows. But if you multiply your rows times the rows per inch, you are actually going to be making 40 rows. Okay? So that's a really simple thing that you can do. And literally all you're going to do is multiply A times B. And that's going to give you what your row count should be. And all of these are approximate, right? So you may not get 8 exactly. You may get 7.75. So roughly right around 40 rows is where you're going to start taking some measurements. I would actually say right around 35. Start taking some measurements to see how close you're going to get. Alright, so that was kind of a quick step into how I do some of my row counts and figuring out what those need to be, and sometimes converting them. Again, whenever you're working in vintage patterns or that you need to recalculate something because maybe you don't get that exact row count, or you're substituting in a yarn, or you're making some serious alterations, it really, really helps to understand some of the principles behind how you get that. How do you get to that new row count? Which will bring us to a simple book review today. Which is, ta-da! This is Sweater Design in Plain English. And this is by Maggie Rigetti. I'm probably saying that wrong and I'm very sorry. But this book right here is pretty useful. It looks super thick and it is a bit of a tome, but I mean, without showing off too much here, hopefully, I don't know if you can read that or not, but this is not super dense writing. There are a lot of illustrations, so please don't take that the size of this as like some thing. It's going to be its own college curriculum. There is a lot of information that is inside of here, like apparently my hair, and towards the end she goes ahead and gives you some basic patterns for some different sweater types, and she does walk you through all the calculations for how she got from point A to point B to point C, and even a few other variations that you can have with their own different letters. But showing you how you can learn how to do the calculations to get into that. This is not like some of my other books where they give you, specific sizing, or that they're giving you a specific stitch pattern for you to work in, or a specific set of stitch patterns. This book is more, okay, well, here's your yarn and here's what you want your finished garment to look like. How do we figure out the math in between? And it does a pretty good job of holding your hand as you walk through those calculations, and explaining what everything means, and why you do certain things certain ways. I have read through a huge chunk of this, I didn't read through all of the patterns in the back because some of the patterns are just not my aesthetic style. It's a preference, not a judgment. So I didn't get too much into those, but definitely the calculation part, and that is a huge thing that really helped kind of cement the ideas in my head about how to go about moving things around and changing things around in a larger conceptual mindset. You know, how do I take this yarn and then make this sweater out of it? Like, what do I need to know how to do? And then I use knitting in the old way, which for some of the shaping purposes as well. Also, that these two books working in conjunction, I find would be very, very useful and very helpful, because knitting in the old way is going to introduce you to like the percentage system so that you would understand like the number of inches that you would need for everything. And then this book here will really hold your hand in walking through some of the calculations that you're going to need, and it will help with understanding knitting in the old way. So I would recommend that if you're going to kind of do these in an order, little bunny ears there again, I would start with this and then move over into knitting in the old way. But do try out, I would recommend, if you're going to get into design or making your own, you make your own patterns for things, especially for things that are fitted specifically for you, try as many different systems as you need to, because what works for me may be very confusing to you. What works for you may not work for me, and it may not work for somebody else. There are many systems out there, and none of those are wrong. Okay? They're all eventually going to get you to the same result. The question then becomes, what makes most sense to you and is the least frustrating from your perspective? I find the percentage system is the least frustrating from my perspective, because I know the percentages, and once I know the percentages, well, then it's just plug and play. But I can understand that that may be a very frustrating thing for people. If that kind of math just doesn't sit very well with you. Like I said, some people's brains see things differently, and different isn't bad. That's literally not the definition of it. Different means not the same. If it works for you, cool. Anyway, back to the whole point. Good book. I do recommend go to your local library, or if you happen to know somebody who has a book, but I'll tell you, go ahead and support your local libraries. They are great sources of information. See if they have a copy of this, whether that is digital or if that is a physical copy. Go ahead and check it out, and so that you can check it out. And I found like this at a local used bookstore. I think I got it for like $5. I mean, brand new, it's $25. So you should be able to find this online as well. But go to your local library, check it out, or borrow it from a friend. Then see if it's worth the investment for your personal library. Anyway, that's part of what I've been working on during this whole hiatus. Has been getting a lot of these things, these projects that I had 4 of them done, finished. So I have the lace one done. You're seeing it there. I just have to sew in a tag for the front and the back. The pink crochet dress, I got all the crocheting done finally. Gosh, that skirt took forever. And now I just need to line it. So that's going to be a fun sewing adventure. Yes, I am breaking down and finally branching into sewing. I have a colorwork piece over here that is currently on the needles and being worked, and once those needles are done, I have another orange piece over here that I will be finishing off. And then I promised myself I will not allow for this many projects to be at once. I will be at maximum 2. Normally I'm a monogamous knitter, and being reminded as to why I don't normally do this. Anyway, So that's all that's been going on. Thanks for hanging out if you've made it this far. It's been really great having you around, and it's been fun filming again. So I'll go ahead and get this edited and get this up. So anyway, I hope you have a great day or night or time. I don't know, whenever you're watching this. And have fun. Make stuff. Bye.